And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is John Carter. John had a near-death experience where he encountered Jesus, and today we're going to learn about it. John, thank you so much for being my guest, and welcome.
Thank you so much. It's an honor, sir, and I look forward to explaining my near-death experience. Personally, I like to call it a death experience, but I understand that a lot of people call it NDE, so I understand that. But just let me know when you want me to explain what happened to me, and we'll take it from there.
All right. Well, we're ready. If you like, let's start on the day that you had it and go from there.
This was in 2020, and 2020 was a bad year for a lot of people, but it was particularly a bad year for me. I didn't realize that I had sepsis poisoning, and I collapsed from sepsis poisoning in my home, and I didn't have a medic alert button or anything, and I wasn't found for 5 days. And when the police finally got to me and the emergency personnel, they rushed me to the hospital, but my organs were failing. And when I got to the emergency room, I had very serious sepsis poisoning throughout my body, and it was damaging my organs. And I died twice, according to the emergency room doctor, and they had to bring me back twice. And when that happened, I had an experience that I would like to share, because this was an experience that changed my life. I'll be honest with you. It completely changed my life. And a lot of people tell me now, you just had a medical delusion or something of that nature. And I tell them, I said, I know the difference between, dream state or medical delusion and something that was very real, something where I could use my five senses, so to speak. And when I died, it's like my back was on the ceiling, if that makes any sense, in the emergency room. And I was looking down on my body, and I was laying there, and the doctor and the nurses were frantic. They seemed frantic anyway. And the doctor was getting those paddle things ready. And another nurse had this oxygen thing that was on my face. And she was squeezing like this bulb. And this other nurse had a needle, and she put it into my arm. And the doctor said, clear. And, I watched my chest rise up, on the gurney. And the first time that happened, I was instantly taken into a spherical tunnel. It was, I guess, it was really bizarre. It was like about 20 by 20, up from the bottom up to the side to side. It was about 20 feet. Okay, I'm trying to gauge it. Seemed like it was about that far. And the inside of that tunnel was showing a film on the walls of my life. And as I'm traveling through this tunnel, I'm seeing things that I've never seen before. But they were all pleasant things from my life. Like when I was 3 years old, my father apparently bought me one of those little metal cars that you could, we're talking about 1962 here, so that was, quite a while back. But he bought me this metal car for the sidewalk, and he put me in it, and it was one of those little metal cars you could pedal. And I'm watching this on the wall of this spherical tube, I guess you could say, that I'm in. And when I got back from all of this, I'll explain that later, but when I got back from all of this, I asked my sister, I said, did Dad buy me a little car or something, And my older sister, confirmed it. She said, yeah, he bought that for your third birthday. And I didn't know. I mean, I completely had forgotten about that. And there it was, in this. So I'm traveling through this tube, and the further I get along, the worse I'm feeling. I don't know if it was a sepsis or what, but I feel like the pleasantness of the life that I'm looking at, through the years, 8, 9, 10, 11, 14, 15, moving through. I'm seeing different things that I did, and pleasant moments in my life, a girlfriend, this, that, or the other, moving right through, and my children being born, as I get into my 20s and my 30s, just really pleasant things. But oddly enough, my soul, which I'm assuming that's what was traveling, it felt really thirsty and dry. I don't know why, but that's the way I felt. And when I got to where I was about 60 years old, there was this huge white, it was a light at the end of this tunnel. I should point that out. And when I finally got to that light, I was about 60 years old in the sphere, and this giant veil got pulled away. This is going to sound weird, but I was laying in the mud, and I could smell the earth. I'm laying in the mud on my back, and I'm looking up into the sky. And it was a sky that I had never seen before. The colors, I've never seen colors like that. Those colors, I don't know, you can't find them here in this realm. The colors were unbelievable. And I was in somebody's left arm, and they had me in their left arm, and I was laying on my back, and this person lifted me up enough to where I was really, really not feeling well, my soul. And this person looks over at me, and it's Jesus Christ, and he's got me in his arm. And he's got this wooden bucket there. It's like like a bucket you'd use to maybe mop a floor, but it was wooden. And he had a wooden spoon, like a big spoon too. And he dipped it into this bucket, and he poured the water down my throat. And he said, in the name of my Father, and he poured it down my throat. And then he took the spoon again, and he put it back into the bucket, and he pulled it back out again, and he put it up to my lips, and he said, and the Son, and he put it down my throat. And it was just, Jeff, it was so refreshing. I mean, it's hard to explain, but all of a sudden I'm feeling completely refreshed. And he puts it in again, and this time he takes the spoon and he pours it over my head. And he said, and the Holy Spirit. And he pours it over my head, and I could feel the water running down my face. And the only way to explain this, I don't know if you've ever seen The Grinch That Stole Christmas at holiday time, where his heart grew 50 times. That's the way I felt. My heart just, my whole body was just enveloped with love. The feeling of, and I looked over into his eyes, and I could see that he was the love, so much love and compassion in his eyes. And I felt so blessed. And he lifted me up, and I was standing next to him, and he was wearing I tell people this, and they think, I'm nuts, but he was wearing just a regular, like, robe you would see in Judea. It wasn't full of, that wasn't full of adornments or anything, or gold or anything like that. And he had a rope tied around his waist, and he had sandals on, and it looked like the Jesus we know. And I found a picture of it, believe it or not. I found a picture of that same face, because when I got back, I'll explain that later, I looked and looked. Man, I researched, because I wanted to see his face. I wanted to find it, because there's been so many different variations of Christian churches that have showed his face. And I finally found it, but I'll explain that later. But anyway, I looked to my left, and there's this giant field, and the field was full of flowers, and it was like a rolling hills. I mean, those hills were just rolling and rolling, and miles of it. I mean, I couldn't see into the distance. It was so far. And those flowers smelled so good. And Jeff, I've never seen flowers like that before, ever. I don't know where in the world you would find them. There were gorgeous colors. Again, colors you would never see here in this realm. I've never seen anything like that before. And amongst all the flowers, there were thousands and thousands of people. And I didn't know who they were, because they were kind of off in the distance. But I looked to my left, and there was this giant, there was just one, there was this giant angel. And he had huge white wings. And when I say huge, I mean big. I mean, they were gorgeous white wings. And he had a blonde hair. He had long blonde hair. And he was smiling at me. And I thought, boy, who's that? You know, so I asked Jesus. I said, Jesus, who's that? And he said, that's Michael. And I said, Michael, who? And he said, that's my Archangel, Michael. And he had a breastplate on, and he had vestments, and on his ankles, he had like those, I don't know, shin guards, I guess you could say, type things. And he had a long sword, but it was sheathed. And what really stood out to me were the wings, how glorious they were. I mean, they were white, and they were so big and so beautiful. They were pure white, like a, I don't know, it was like a, I mean, they were not tarnished at all. I mean, it was just, they were so shiny and beautiful. You know, I try to explain that, but, you know, in that realm, everything is different. It's really strange. And I asked Jesus, I said, you know, who that was. And he said, Michael. And he said, that's who brought you here. And I said, I looked at him and I said, what? And he said, yeah. He said, and I said, is this heaven? And he said, yes, it is. And I said, Jesus, I said, I don't know if I belong here. I was a sinner, you know. I said, I sinned every day. You know, I don't think I'm worthy to be here. I'll be honest with you. And I was serious about it. You know, I felt kind of guilty. You know, I thought I was kind of like, I felt like I was stealing something or something, you know, like, what am I doing here? You know, I mean, I'm just, who am I, you know? And so I told him, I said, you know, Jesus, I don't think I'm worthy to be here. You know, I probably should have you probably should have sent me to that other realm if there is one. You know, I don't know, but, and he smiled at me and he said, John, he said, the last will be first and the first will be last. And he said, in my Father's house are many mansions, and I go to prepare a place not only for you and your family, but also all of your friends. And he walked me towards the crowd. And as I got up to the crowd, lo and behold, he walked me right up to my mom and dad. And there's my dad. And I was like, oh my God, that's my dad. And he looked like he was, when my dad was in his, I don't know, maybe 60s. And my mom was in her 50s. She had that, you know, 1970s hair, and my dad had, he always used that dippity do stuff in his hair. And but anyway, I said, "How you doing, Dad?" And he said, "Pretty good for an old fella." He gave me the biggest hug. And my mom, she was there, and she said, "Oh, Johnny," and she gave me the biggest hug, and I could feel so much love. And in her right arm, she had my niece, and the niece was Katie, and she had died from a diabetic coma when she was 9 years old, years ago. And she was there, and she said, "Hi, Uncle Johnny." And I got down and I looked at her and I said, "Katie, I said, "It's so nice to see you." And she gave me the biggest hug. And again, my heart just was overflowing with love inside. And as I walked up and down, I'm seeing people that are from my family, my aunts, my uncles, my uncle, Aunt Helen, my Uncle Nick, he's real tall. I see my Aunt Mary Margaret, and I see her husband. And he died relatively early, but he's up there. And I saw, as I'm walking, I'm seeing all of these people. I ran into the person I was named after, who died at Pearl Harbor. And his name was John Kyleman. And he still had his sailor suit on. And I was like, he's like, "You don't know who I am, do you?" And I said, "I think I do." I said, "Are you John Kyleman?" And he said, "Yes, I'm your uncle." And I was freaking out, I was like, man, and everybody was giving me a hug, literally everybody. I mean, it was hug city up there. Okay. I mean, it was great. I mean, I can't explain the love that I felt from all of these people. And as I got deeper into the crowd there, I started running into people that were older. When I say older, I'm talking about early 20th century, late 19th century, where their clothing was different. It was a little odd, stuff I'd never seen before. And I walked up to this one fella, and he had a real nice suit on, but his tie was like I don't know, it was like looked like one of them Colonel Sanders ties, black, and he had a black suit on, and he had a medal around his neck. And I said, "What is that?" He said, "You don't know who I am, do you?" And I said, "No." He said, "I'm your great, great, great grandfather."
Wow.
And I said, "What?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "My name's Andrew. It's nice to meet you." And he gave me the biggest hug. And I said, "That's a cool medal. Where'd you get that?" And he said, "I got that in the Civil War." He said, "I fought for the Union, and that's the Victory Medal." And I was like, "Really?" I mean, it just blew me away. But again, I want to emphasize, when I was up there, and I'm kind of feeling it now, I mean, the love that I felt was just, it was amazing. Everywhere, every person I touched, everything that, as I'm brushing my legs through the flowers, I mean, everything up there was giving the essence of love, kindness, compassion. And everybody was smiling and talking and having a good time. And there was no pain or suffering or anything. It didn't appear as though there was any of that up there. And as I went deeper into the crowd, I met a lot of folks that were further back in my generational genealogy, so to speak. And it was really bizarre because I ran into this one guy who was dressed, I don't know, maybe like the 1500s, somewhere in that category. And he was pushing a sausage cart. And I looked at him like, what's going on? And I could smell the sausages he was pushing, They smelled really pungent, but smelled good. I don't know if you ever picked up a log of sausage, but it does smell good. But I mean, his cart was just full of them, and he was trying to give me one, and he gave me the biggest hug, and he's talking in a dialect I didn't know. Sounded like maybe Hungarian or possibly Czechoslovakian. I don't know, but he was trying to give me one, and I waved my hand like I can't take that. I don't know why, but I said I can't take that, and I gave him a big hug, and he smiled and went on his way. And there was, as I further, there was a guy who was wearing vestments. He had a bucket helmet on his head, and it had a cross right here. And he had a white tunic like thing on, and it had a red cross right down the middle and comes this way, like a cross you would see. And it was white with a red cross. And he had a sword in his sheath, and he had I don't know, what do they call that stuff from the 1400, like chain mail on his legs and arms. And I thought, man, that he really stood out, in the crowd. And I asked one of my relatives, I said, who is that? And they said he probably fought, in the Crusades, but he's related to you. And I didn't know that. I was freaking out. But anyway, as I went further, I ran into a lot of different people that I didn't know, folks that I had no clue who they were, but they were apparently relation, because they were all giving me big hugs. And it got to the point where I went back through the crowd, and I caught up with Jesus, who was talking to a lot of folks. And I said, Jesus, I said, this is beautiful. My whole family's up here. I said, am I going to stay up here? And he said, no, John. He said, I wanted to talk to you. And I said, what's going on? He said, I'm going to send you back. And I said, why are you sending me back? Because I didn't want to leave, to be honest with you, Jeff. And he said, I'm sending you back. He said, because there's too much hate in the world right now. He said, there's a lot of hate. He said, and I'm really, really not happy with that. He said, I want people to learn to love as I love them, the same love that the innocence of a child brings. That's exactly what he said. A 3-year-old child, that innocent love. He said, that's the way I want everyone to love one another. And I thought to myself, man, how am I going to do that? It's a crazy world, that down there, And so I told him, I said, what would you want me to do? And he said, I'm going to send you back, and you just tell people, love one another. He said, and pray for those that are your enemies. Tell them to pray for those that are your enemies. He said, because love conquers evil. He said, light conquers darkness. He said, and love is the most important thing. And he said, I know you feel that love now. He said, the Holy Spirit now runs through you. And he said, it's going to be easy for you to learn different languages. And he said, I'm going to send you back. And please, whatever you do, don't forget to spread this word that I'm telling you about love. Well, I felt overwhelmed. And I said, Jesus, who am I to do this? I said, I'm not worthy of this. Like I said, I'm a sinner. I don't. And he said, John, he was like, don't even worry about that. He said, when I died on the cross, all your sins were forgiven. And, I should point out also that I met a lot of interesting people up there too. I ran into St. Francis of Assisi. And he was very unique in that, of course, he was wearing a Franciscan robe, but he had his hands had wounds, and his feet had wounds, and he gave me the biggest hug, but I couldn't help but notice that his wounds were like glowing in his hands and in his feet. And it was the same thing when I ran into this guy who I didn't know that had that. I think they call it the stigmata, and he had that too. And then since I got back, I found out who that was, and that was this guy named Padre Pio. I didn't know who he was, but I found him by researching it. But anyway, he was up there. There were a lot of people up there. I want to point something out too, Jeff. There was also people up there that were from every denomination, Christian denomination you can think of. And maybe some you probably couldn't think of. Now, I got to say that they were all relation, so I'm doubtful that any of them were Muslims or any of them were, Buddhists or whatever the case may be. But that's not to say that they're not up there. I don't know. I mean, I just don't know. All I know is that all my relation was up there, and they were the ones that greeted me when I got up there. And it was amazing that they were all together like that, and that they were all enjoying each other's company and hugging each other and talking to one another. It was like being at a family reunion again. But the family reunion went back hundreds of years. And finally, at what seemed like maybe 7-8 hours of meeting people, I finally got tired. And I laid down in the field, and it smelled so good. And I fell asleep. And when I woke up, I was in ICU. And I had a breathing apparatus in my throat. And it was down my tracheal tube, I guess. And I looked over, and I was very weak. I remember that. And I looked over, and there was, because this was right in the height of COVID. And I looked over, and there's my daughter with a mask on and my son with a mask on. And they're both crying, looking through the window at me. And the love that I felt, I gave them a thumbs up, and they smiled at me. And I could see that they were smiling through their covering, their little N95 or whatever those things are. And I felt, really, really good. That's the only way I can explain it, and later on, and I went through a series of going to different medical institutions. They transferred me because of COVID. They transferred me out of that hospital. They sent me up to a hospital that didn't have COVID at the time. And that was in Portage, Indiana, Regency Hospital. And I had a doctor for basically every organ, Jeff. And they worked on me and worked on me. I got my kidneys functioning properly. Cardiologist did like 5 echocardiograms on me. They really went to town on me. My lungs were looked at. They fixed that. They got my respiratory straightened out. They got my blood pressure straightened out with medicine. Pretty soon, I was sepsis free.
That's good.
They came in and told me, they said, your sepsis, because they were giving me tons of antibiotics, I guess. I had what's called a PIC thing in my shoulder, and they were giving me kidney dialysis and so forth, all kinds of stuff. And fortunately, at that point, I hadn't gotten COVID, but they said, there's a problem with your heart. Now, to me, my heart felt great after that NDE, but I guess there was a problem. So they sent me down to Indianapolis, and there a team of heart surgeons went to work on me, and they put in a new aorta on my heart. They gave me open heart surgery, and they replaced my aorta with a cow's aorta. So, and now I got a strong urge to graze, in a field, but I'm joking. But it was a really strange experience, though, because normally I look at people when they get out of open heart surgery, and it's all they can do to get up and feel well. And I felt like $1 million when I got out of surgery. Seriously. I mean, my heart was like, since that NDE, my heart was still like 50 times its size, but now all the blood was flowing where it needed to go because of that change. And from there, they sent me to a place up so I'd be closer to home, a rehabilitation place up in Mishawaka, Indiana, near South Bend, and they gave me COVID, if you can imagine that. And they sent me to this really bad nursing home, really bad. Now, I want to point out that as I'm going through all of these facilities, the food is not that great. I'm not complaining. I'm thankful because I'm alive, for starters, but every now and then I would get a nurse or a doctor that wasn't up to snuff. They were, overworked because of COVID or whatever the case may be, and they would come in and be a little testy with me. And I told them, I said, I love you. I just want you to know that, you're my brother, or sister, and I love you. And I said, and I think you're doing a great job, and I just want to pass that on. I said, you people are angels, and it lifted them up and made them smile. And that's what I want to do since I've been back. That's what I've been doing. I've been trying to make it a better world for everybody by telling everybody the message that Jesus gave me. That is, love is what makes the world a good place to live. And to spread love amongst each other and to show love to one another, the same love that, again, like an innocent child brings to Jesus. It's the same thing. And, what a world it would be if everyone could get along, like in Ukraine right now, as an example, or China and Taiwan, or, what a world it would be if everybody could just give each other a hug and say, look, let's bygones be bygones, and let's all love each other and be kind to one another. And that's what I'm back here to teach, is to teach that. And sometimes I think I run into people that, I hate to say it, but I think they're demonically possessed, that are real mean. But when they see me now, used to be, I would have to deal with them, like in my job, I would have to deal with them and cuff them or whatever the case may be. But now, all I got to do is smile at them and tell them, look, man, I don't know what you're going through, but I can feel it in my heart. And I love you, give me a hug. And boy, it's like you could see the evilness just drain out of them, and I give them a hug and it's like, it changes them. And that's the kind of love I want to spread. The love of kindness and compassion and love. And that's what Jesus taught me. And he filled me with it inside. And, I was never a religious person prior to all of this. I'll be honest with you, I wasn't. And I was very suspect. That's another reason when I was up there that I thought I shouldn't be there, because I was very suspect of the Bible and, believing in Jesus Christ and all of this stuff. I thought, man, could any of that be real? But now if somebody asks me, I had a guy ask me, for instance, he said, how do you know that Jesus is real? And that story is real. He said, there's no evidence to that effect. And I said, well, let's look at it from a different point of view. And Jeff, I don't know where I got this from. Honestly, it just popped into my head. I mean, I'd never thought this way before. But I said, back in Judea, 2,000 plus years ago, I said, how many guys, carpenters, poor carpenters, I said, how many poor carpenters do you think lived there? And the guy said, I don't know, maybe 200, 300, 400. I said, that's a good ballpark figure. I don't know either. I don't think anybody knows. I said, but how is it that one poor carpenter changed the entire face of humanity? And he has over 3 billion with a B, billion followers on Earth. How can that be? And he said, you know what? He said, you got a point. He said, I never looked at it from that way. And again, I want to emphasize, I don't know where I got that from, but I just popped into my head. I ran into one guy that said, and I talked to people a lot about this experience. And one fellow said, he said, you believe in you Christians believe in the Trinity. And I said, well, I said, I don't know that much about it, but he said, look, he said, 3 cannot equal 1. He said 3 equals 3, and again, Jeff, I don't know where I got this from, but I had a cup of water, I was at a restaurant with him, a cup of water, and I said, watch. And I poured one drop on the table, and then I poured another drop on top of that drop, and then I poured another drop on top of that drop. And I said, see, 3 can become 1. And he was like, his eyes just like, he was like, oh my God. And I said, yeah. I said, see? I said, that's what we believe, the Trinity. That's it. And again, I don't know. I would have never learned that anywhere else if it wasn't for when Jesus said in the Holy Spirit, and he poured that over my head. It gave me a lot of head sense, I guess you could say, about teaching his word and teaching love and teaching compassion and kindness, and like I said, my heart grew 50 times its size. And now that, I'll be honest with you, I'd like to go back. I'm in no hurry to die. Don't get me wrong, but I'll be honest with you. I know where I'm going, and it's exciting now. I'm not afraid of death at all. It was like, now I'm like, wow, But anyway, this place gives me COVID rehabilitation place. They send me to this really bad nursing home, really bad. They didn't even take care of you there. I got real sick there. I got a double pneumonia with COVID, and they shipped me back. Guess where? Back down to Indianapolis again. Same hospital I had the heart surgery. They put me in COVID ICU. I was that sick, and this was right in December of 2020. And people were dying from COVID. Jeff, it was crazy down there. Nurses, doctors were working 12 hours a day. And they were wearing these like strange looking suits that had like an oxygen thing on the back of it. Well, anyway, I noticed that in ICU that when they would intubate somebody, which means put the thing down their throat, that like 2 or 3 days later, the blue light would go off and they would die, and they couldn't always bring them back. And I was so sad about that. And I said, what you people are doing is unbelievable, and you're all angels. I said, but of course I was trying to lift them all up because they were so tired, most of them. And they always felt really sad after they lost a patient, which I guess is normal. And I asked the nurse, I said, because Jeff, they were dying like crazy. And they wanted to intubate me too, because I was really sick. And I said, oh no. I said, no, you're not doing that to me. And they said, why not? And I said, because I said, I want remdesivir. That's what I told them. I said, I want remdesivir. And they said, remdesivir? And I said, yeah, that's what President Trump had. I said, that's what got him well. I said, that's what I want. And the doctor said, okay, we'll try it. So he put it into that PICC line, and I actually confirmed it. I looked up and I saw it on the bag. It was hanging there. It said remdesivir. Well, pretty soon, my lungs started coughing up all of this stuff. And I had a suction tube, and I'm sucking it all up, and it's all coming up. And I don't know, maybe a half a month later, my blood pressure, my oxygen, my lungs, my respiratory, everything was just as it should be. My lungs were clear. They sent me down to a lower COVID place. I still had COVID, So they sent me down to another level where I was asymptomatic, they said. And then they sent me to a rehabilitation place down in Indianapolis, real nice place for my heart. And it was physical training to get back on your feet, because when I was in the hospital for close to 9 months and I had lost all my muscle mass in my legs and in my arm, I had to learn how to walk again. I had to learn how to get muscles in my arms again. And I'm still working on my balance to this day. But it's like kind of learning all over again. And I had to go through a lot of therapy. But I really pushed myself, Jeff, because I knew I had to get that message out that Jesus gave me. And so I pushed myself in rehabilitation. I told them if they wanted me to do 30 reps on a machine, I'd do 40, because I wanted to get out of there. I wanted to go home. Well, April of 2021 rolls around. I'm still in there, but I'm working on it. And I got well enough to where I could walk about 300 feet with a walker. And they said, okay, you're ready to go home. And I was like, wow. So my son-in-law came and picked me up. I got home. I was still a little dicey getting around the house, but I managed it. I was able to manage it. And I could cook for myself. I had a wheelchair. My daughter and son-in-law had moved everything inside the home down to where I could reach it. And they completely redid the inside of the home and made it disability friendly. And that was really nice of them to do. Kind thing to do. And I felt like $1 million when I got back in the house here. But since I've been home, I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And I was on a different podcast for my NDE, and a lot of people were very happy to see the message. The message got through to close to 69,000, 70,000 viewers. Mm. And I was really happy about that, because even if I just get to one person and explain to them the importance of loving your neighbor and loving people around you, and if somebody's really cruel to you or mean to you, pray for them and let them know that you care, and have some compassion for people, because not everybody's having a good day out there. And I'll be honest with you, every day I'm vertical now. I'm a happy camper.
That's great.
Ever since it's empty. Yeah. And but I'll also be honest with you when I say I can't wait to go back.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's common. John, thank you for sharing your experience with us. And I would like to take you back to the beginning and maybe ask you some questions about it.
Sure.
When you first had your experience, you were in the hospital, you had sepsis. Mm-hmm. Did you just happen to lose consciousness and then basically you died, or how did you?
Well, what happened was I was at home and I went to stand up from my bed and I collapsed and I knocked a table over. All I can remember from that is that I reached for my medic alert button, but it wasn't there because they took me off Medicaid, so I didn't have it. And I fell and collapsed. And I woke up about 5 days later, really, really sick in the dark. And I was reaching around for my phone and I found it. And I dialed 911 and they came through the window of my home because my front door was locked. They came through the bedroom window, police officer, opened the front door. Fire department and rescue personnel came in and they got me. And I was so sick that I could barely remember any of that. And when I got to the emergency room, boy, they went to work on me. I mean, it was really crazy, frantic. And all of a sudden, when I got to the emergency room, I don't know what they gave me, but my heart shut down and everything just went black, I mean, I just boom like that, and that's when I felt my back on the ceiling and I'm looking down.
All right. That kind of clears it up for me. You mentioned that when you were going through the tunnel, you saw things that you either didn't remember or you never saw before.
Yes.
Can you remember, or can you tell us some of the other things that you saw?
Sure. I remember a girl that I dated when I was about 18 years old. And I'll be honest with you, I thought I was going to be with this girl for the rest of my life. You know how it is when you're 18. You know, you have a love and you think you're going to be with that person for the rest of your life. And I was single at the time, but I had some really pleasant and nice memories with that girl. And there she is, you know. I mean, on the wall, me and her are, you know, on the beach where we used to go and running down the beach and having fun. And, you know, that I saw all of that. There were many instances. For instance, I saw, it's going to sound weird, but I saw when I was sitting in the waiting room when my son was born. Because back then, if a woman had a C-section, they didn't let the men in back in the early 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sitting in the waiting room, nervous, very nervous. And back then, I think we talked about this earlier, but back then they had, I know it's going to sound crazy, they had in the chair, they had the ashtray right there. And this is a hospital.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm smoking a pack of cigarettes because my wife is having our baby, and you know, the doctor comes out, he's got blood all over the front of him. And he said, you got a son, Mr. Carter. And I was so happy. You know, so happy. I started passing out blue cigars to everybody in the hospital. You know, I was running down the hospital. I was so happy. And I know people probably think I'm nuts, but, you know, it was a pleasant experience in my life. And I got a chance to see him through the glass thing where you can see babies, you know, and they were changing him. And they let me in there actually to rock him in a rocking chair. And that was really pleasant. And I saw all of that, Jeff, you know, and those were pleasant memories, just great memories from my life.
I think you said it, the whole experience over there lasted about 7 or 8 hours.
It seemed like it.
But probably on this side, how long do you think you were gone for? A few minutes?
2 seconds.
2 seconds.
The time over there, I've learned this. The time over there is completely different than the time here. What may be a fraction of a second or a second here can be hours on end there. And it's really weird, but it's a whole different realm. A whole different realm. Now, a lot of people have asked me, well, what about, you know, these other places? What about purgatory, or what about hell? Or, you know, I can't account for that. I don't know. I didn't go there. I don't know if there's there or not. You know, I really don't. But I know this much. There are bad people in this world. We all see that every day on the news. There are a lot of bad people in this world that do things that are unsavory, so to speak, or very evil. And it's those folks that I want to reach out to the most. People like, you know, Putin over there in Russia, or, you know, President Xi in China, or, you know, I'd like to sit down with them and say, look, you know, you guys need to learn to love, you know. Mm-hmm. You know, you shouldn't hate people, or, you know, think that, you know, grabbing land is something that's important. That's not important here. What's important here is that we love one another, and that we make this whole life a pleasant experience for one another. That's what's important. And, you know, if I could get through to them and talk to them about that, I think it might make a difference. But, you know, that's another story, I guess, for another day. But in the meantime, I'm trying to do that with a lot of folks, you know, by getting on these podcasts and trying to get that message out that love is extremely important.
How about the reality of the place? Did it feel over there like that place was more real than here, and here is the dream?
It wasn't you know, I know what a dream state feels like. I've certainly had a lot of dreams, like a lot of folks, but it wasn't really a dream state. It felt very real. It felt like when you step outside your front door and you feel the wind, you know, and you feel the fresh air. And it's a whole different environment than your living room that you walked out of. That's the way it felt. It felt like I was in a completely different realm, and everything, I want to emphasize, everything smelled so good, smelled so nice, and everybody smelled so nice. And Jesus, you know, I want to emphasize that when I looked into his eyes, I saw something I'd never seen before. Never. You know, I've never seen so much love. I mean, it just gripped me. That love. And I haven't changed. I mean, I haven't changed since I got back. I feel that so strongly now that I have to share it.
Now, you said you weren't a religious person before.
No.
Do you consider yourself a religious person now, or spiritual, or what?
I consider myself a person who's trying to teach. Look, I'm not going to tell people that they need to believe in Jesus. I don't think that's I don't think it's fair for me to do that, because people are going to believe what they're going to believe. But I do share my experience with people, and I say, you know, look, you know, Jesus is very real for me because I was there and I got a chance to talk to him. And I certainly wasn't worthy to talk to him because, you know, he's the King of Kings of the universe. But I certainly wasn't worthy. But I don't know why he picked me out of anybody. But here I am. And so I started to, you know, I felt like I didn't feel worthy when I was up there to be in his presence. And that's when he said, he knew that. And he said, he looked at me and he said, John, the last will be first and the first should be last, you know? And I didn't know what that meant because, I didn't read the Bible, what that meant. So when I got back, I kind of looked it up in the Bible, and he did say that in the Bible. And I was like, wow, you know, I didn't know that. And so I'm not a religious person per se. My religion is to teach everyone that I run into, to lift them up and make them feel good about themselves and love them and show compassion towards them and let them know that I'm their friend in Christ, but I'm their friend. And I'm not gonna, dally around the fact that they may not believe in Christianity or, if I run into a Buddhist monk, I'm going to love them just as much as I am anyone else. If I run into somebody who's a mullah from the Muslims, I'm going to give them a hug and tell them, Jesus loves you. And so do I. And please, love your neighbor. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the message that's important here. And that's the message I'm trying to get through to folks.
Since you've been back, have you tried to look up any of the people that you saw while you're over there, like rediscover your family tree?
Yeah, I did. I saw people that I had completely kind of forgot about. I also saw my sister has lost 2 sons to drugs, and she lost her husband as well to a chemical explosion in 1989. He was a pipe fitter, and he got blown like 60 feet, and got killed. And she had to raise 3 boys on her own. And 2 of the boys have since crossed over. And I saw all 3 of them when I was up there. And I was like, whoa, and I was great friends with her husband, Bob. And I saw him, and he still had a welder's cap on. And he said, how you doing, John? And he said, man, I missed you. That's what he said. Gave me a biggest hug. And I gave her son, Michael, a big hug. And I gave her son, Joey, a big hug. And, they were, and I ran into people that I didn't think I was going to run into ever. I ran into one of my friend's parents, a close friend's parents. Why would I do, they're not family, but here they are. And they said, thank you for protecting our daughter. And I was like, okay. And I gave them a big hug, and they were like, we mean it, thank you, they said. And I met a fella that, well, I kind of got a crush on a girl, and I met her dad, who had passed away. And he said, I hope she finds you. He said, because I know that you'll take great care of her and that you'll protect her. And I thought, man, I got to get that message to her. And since I've been back, I have. But unfortunately, she hasn't taken the bait.
Well, how have your friends and family reacted since you've been back?
Well, my family's been very supportive. Very supportive. My older sister in particular. But I told my older brother, I saw his daughter, the one that had the diabetic coma, and he cried, he cried tears of joy. And that made me feel like $1 million inside, because she was so beautiful. And, she was an angel when she was in this realm. I mean, she was such a cute little girl. And to have something like that happen is really sad. And frankly, not necessary, but it happened. And there she is in my mom's arms. And my mom was, of course, was a very loving lady. And and especially later on in her life, she was very loving. And she, it stands to reason that she would have Katie in her right arm, that's the way I look at it now. I ran into people also like aunts and uncles that I had kind of completely forgot about. I ran into my Uncle Tom, and he always wore suspenders for some reason. And I ran into his wife, Dorothy, who was a really nice lady. And she was an aunt of mine on my mom's side, and really nice. And I ran into my Aunt Bobby. Oh, this is a funny story. I ran into my Aunt Bobby, and that was from my dad's side. And she gave me a big hug, and she was always really kind. And I said, Aunt Bobby, do you remember when I was 7 years old and we were visiting you down in Missouri? I said, and you gave me a Pop-Tart, a cherry Pop-Tart. And I was only 7 years old. And she said, yes, I do remember that. And I said, you know what? I said, that was the tastiest thing I had ever had in my life when I was 7 years old, up until that point. And that was when they first came out, Pop-Tarts, back in 1967. And she laughed. And she thought that was so funny. And that's the way it is up there. Everybody's laughing and having a good time. And it's so pleasant. And it's well, I hate to say it, but it's like a party up there. Everybody's, and I didn't see streets of gold or anything, but I'm sure they're up there somewhere. Jesus said there's a lot of mansions. I didn't see those, but I'm sure they're up there somewhere. I mean, the hills rolled and rolled and rolled, deep into the horizon. So, I don't know what, was way back there, but I know that in my presence, there was probably, I want to say, and this is an educated guess, but a ballpark figure, I would say maybe 5,000-6,000 people in this field. Now there were that many. I mean, it was just packed.
Wow.
Full of people, and they were all relation, or they were friends, relation of friends. I ran into a lot of people like that too. I ran into a girl who's been friends of mine since high school, and her husband died in a automobile accident, and his name was Brian, and he had a mustache and a kind of thin fella, and he gave me a big hug and said, John, it's nice to meet you. And he said, I want to thank you. And I said, thank me for what? I said, who are you, first of all? He said, I'm Brian. He said, he went on to say that he was the husband of my good friend. And it just, I was dumbfounded. And I gave him the biggest hug, and he said, thank you for protecting her and looking out for her. And I told her that, and she cried because she really loved the fella.
Well, John, I'm running out of time. So one thing I want to ask you is, if people want to reach out to you and ask you questions or chit chat with you, are you open to that?
Absolutely. Please do.
Okay. What's the best way to reach you?
You can reach me if you need to be lifted up and you need love and compassion and you need to learn how to teach that to others. You can reach me at my email, which is, I know it's going to sound silly, but because that was the email I had before all of this happened, but John Carter of Mars, 78 at gmail.com. Again, that's John Carter of Mars, 78 at gmail.com. And if they want to leave a phone number or they ask if they want to see the picture I have of Jesus, I'll be glad to send them that same picture that I found that is Jesus. I have that picture and I found it. I researched and researched and researched. Man, I tell you, I really got into that. And I finally found it. And I was so happy. And I think it was Jesus that let me find it. But it was his way of saying, show it to everybody. So I can show that to folks if they need to see it, what he looks like, what he really looks like in real life. And I want to point out something too, and that is that Jesus, the Jesus I met, he wasn't adorned with a crown or white vestments or, he was dressed very kind of paltry. To be honest with you, he was very poor. Like, just like a guy, back in Judea would have been dressed 2,000 years ago. And of course, he had the wounds in his hands and they glowed, and the wounds in his feet and they glowed, and the wounds in his side and it glowed. And it's the same thing with those two other guys that I met. They had the hands, but St. Francis was kind of neat because he had the monastery type brown vestment on, and again, he didn't look, wasn't adorned in anything gloriful or, I didn't see any streets of gold or anything. I know that a lot of people talk about that. They may be up there. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I don't want to downplay it, but
right.
I'm just happy that, number one, that I'm alive. Every day when I wake up, I thank God and I say, thank you, Jesus, for giving me another day, and now I want to spread the good word.
Do you have anything that you would like to promote, like a website or anything in general?
No, I don't. I wish I did. I don't know how to make a website, but what I try and do is reach out to folks, and I've had an opportunity to do that many, many times, especially with a lot of folks who are feeling suicidal or feeling very ill or things of that nature. I talk to them and try and make them feel good about themselves and try and lift up their soul and let them know that Jesus loves them and so do I, and that they have a friend here.
Right.
And, what they say, a friend in need is a friend indeed.
Yeah.
And, if you let your light shine, it's just like the song, if you let your little light shine, all the darkness runs away, all the evil runs away, but you got to let that light shine.
All right, John, well, before we finish up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
Yes. Jesus told me to tell everyone, and this is the message. Jesus told me to tell everyone, love your neighbor as I love you, and I love everyone on earth. There's too much hate in the world. Everyone needs to learn to love one another. I'll be back soon. Learn to love one another and be kind to one another. And that's the message he told me to sell. And since I got back, man, I've been really talking to folks about it. I talked to nurses about it, doctors. I prayed with them. It's been a real good experience since I've been back. But I'll be honest with you, I want to go back someday because it was nice.
John, thank you for that message, and thank you so much for being my guest today.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate you, and I wish you the best.
Thank you so much, Jeff. And may God bless you, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
To get that message out.
Thank you, and God bless you. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.